Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, we have the always amazing David Derwin. How are you?
Good afternoon, Tracy. All doing well, doing well. We've had exciting couple of days, so I'm looking forward to discussing all these points with you on the show today.
Excellent. So many of you guys will have seen David already. He is a commodity portfolio manager at PI Financial, and we've done several grain marketing episodes together. It seems that we do about quarterly. I think that's about what we end up doing. Isn't
Yeah,
that right? Yeah.
yeah.
Let's start by just having a conversation about the markets, where it's at.
hmm
It's hard to know what to do when the markets are high, when the markets are low. So take it away and let's chat about the markets and then we'll get into our conversation.
Absolutely, and timing is actually quite good here for this show, Tracy, because here we are in the middle of what's probably our first weather rally of the season here for the grain markets. Some fairly big price increases in the last few days here. So and we all know that the weather outside has been very hot. It's dry in many places, very dry in some, and certainly having its impact on prices. And it's true what you say, like when markets were trending up, and I think back, 3 years ago when a lot of the uptrend began, right? When markets are going higher and it's trending up, it makes decisions challenging, right? Do you price your grain? How do you protect it? Do you hedge it? What do you do? But at the same time, it's equally challenging when prices are trending lower, like we've been seeing in this past year, and it makes for challenging times. I mean, it's never easy when it's never easy necessarily to market grain because there's always fluctuations and psychology involved and risks to consider and opportunities that you want to capture. So given where we're sitting at in the markets today, it's kind of good to look back at kind of where we've been, right? And we have been trending lower for the past year now. And we all remember about a year ago when canola was sitting up at about $1,100 a ton, or around $25 a bushel. And at that point in time, I think you heard a lot of comments and commentary that canola can only go higher. I mean, it can't go lower. Well, whenever you get too much, when too many people are on one side of the boat, it often tips, right? So, and what led up to those high prices, we all remember it well, but it's good to get a reminder of it. Like, all right, we had like in 2020, of course, we had the COVID and all the food-induced commodity hoarding. And then in 2021, we had the drought across a lot of the North American growing regions. And then finally, 2022, we had the Russian invasion into the Ukraine. So a major war going on in an important breadbasket of the world. And that's what pushed prices up. And here we are now, a year after those peaks. And it's definitely is a different story.
Yeah. I'm glad you took us back there. I think as farmers and business people in general, we're so busy. That's not that long ago, but it's
Yeah.
easy to forget where we came from not that long ago in the trends in the pricing, right? So thanks for going there. That was a great refresh to where we're at now.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you want to talk about timing? You hear about waiting until the seed's in the ground, waiting until the crop's starting to grow, or if it's in the bin, fall time. Do you wait or why wait? Take that away.
Yeah, and it's always a challenge to think about, how are you going to best market your crop, right? Because as a producer, of course, it's not just the price risk that you're thinking of, it's the production risk too. So what might make really good sense from a pure price point of view is not necessarily the most operationally smart decision to make either, right? Because you've got to think about what your yields are going to be, and waiting for the seed to get into the ground, for it to start growing or in the bin is definitely a bit of a it's an exercise in just what am I actually going to produce versus how much do I want to commit. And we still certainly do remember some of those buyout contracts and penalties of a couple of years ago. And that I think has certainly caused people to have a little bit of a hesitancy to price too much. Absolutely. Naturally, that only makes sense. But as we'll find out, of course, there are other tools that you can use to do that. And I think the other thing that really causes people to wait is some of those points that we talked about earlier, COVID and drought, and then Russian invasion, and the idea of, it wasn't that long ago that when that happened, and we all have a bit of a bias towards things that have happened in the near past to think, well, we're going to get back up to those prices, right? We have to get back up there again. Well, the last year has proven that it isn't, and probably more than just the last year. History, you go back 100 years, 200, 300, 400, go back as long as you want to go. Very often these really big price bubbles that happen, eventually a bubble pops and you can't put the bubble back together, just like you can't put toothpaste back into the toothpaste tube. So it makes it uh, give a big influence on what we're thinking going forward. But yeah, prices have been drifting lower. The trends are down. It's not going to be without its price rallies. And, that's where we are today. And I think we really want to be mindful of the fact that, where are you at on in terms of production? How much have you priced? What's committed? But also, what are prices doing now, and how can you capture them? And as we mentioned too, where we're sitting here at the beginning, or maybe in the middle, or maybe at the end of our first weather-driven rally of the season. So that brings up naturally, how do we best hedge and manage those opportunities and risks?
Okay, where I want to go, and I know you touched on this a little bit, not sure if you want to go there a little bit more, but there seems to be a lot of reasons not to price your grain. Do you want to touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, and it all comes from those main points of I don't want to sell and commit too much to the elevators, right? We don't want to be short on our deliveries. And then the second one is that prices are going to go back up, and we're going to start rallying up, and we're going to go higher again. And we don't know exactly where prices are going to go, but we do know that the trend has been down for the past year, and financial gravity has had a big impact on grain prices, but also all commodities in general. Crude oil, of course, and natural gas, and a lot of commodities, except cattle, which we'll touch upon later in the episode. So those are a lot of reasons why they don't want to price, right? Concerned about what they're going to grow, weather conditions, and price. But I mean, the bigger picture is, there is one really, really important reason why you want to look at capturing and hedging some of these prices. And that's just because prices are still really quite good, right? They might not be up at the $800,000-900,000 a ton for canola, but $600,000-700,000 a ton on canola is still a very good price. So, you have to look at the situation that we're in now and not get too influenced by where we were. And get too reticent in terms of how we're going to price this. And that's exactly where options come into play. And as you know, I'm a big believer in options because I know they work. I've seen them work. They're an extremely valuable marketing tool. And that makes some of those reasons why you shouldn't hedge a little bit easier to make those pricing and hedging and marketing decisions, because you've got a lot more flexibility. So, production is a big concern why we're not going to be, why people don't want to do too much, and then hope that prices are going to go back up. I'd say those are the two biggest reasons.
Okay, perfect. That was a good recap. The reasons not to price your grain, kind of what producers are saying. And then on the flip side, the big reason why you should, and of course, is to protect your revenue. So I know you touched on that. If you want to go into that a little bit more, feel free to do that. And then we could talk about futures, options, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
If you want to go there a little bit more.
Yep. Yeah, and options are a tool that a lot of people have used. I'm finding more and more interest in them, and figuring out how they best fit in with your overall marketing plan. But sometimes you get the feedback, well, there's a premium and there's a cost associated with options, and well, that's true. I mean, like any insurance, there is a premium that you pay to protect and hedge your risks, but you got to look too just at anywhere, what, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7% of your overall revenues can also be spent on crop insurance. So it's not like looking at options is something that would be really out of the ordinary for most producers. So you sometimes hear that, well, it's costly to do that. Well, it can also be very costly not to, right? Again, you look back historically, and when canola was $1,100, $1,000, even 900, there may have been some pushback saying, well, I don't want to spend 50, 60, or 40 or $80 a ton on different option strategies. But yet, now that we are sitting here $400 or $500 a ton lower, that 50 or $60 a ton looks like a pretty good price to pay. So it's all relative, and there's a time and a place for it. And the nice thing is you can be very selective on when you want to use these tools, so that it takes that concern of the cost out of the equation, right? It's a time and a place to be using them, and the same would go with futures. Although I think options really give the grower something that they can't really access and use in the same way, because it is such a unique marketing tool.
Perfect. Hey, futures options. If you want to add anything there, please do. This time in this episode, we are going to touch on the cattle markets. Yay for the cattle producers. So I'm excited to hear you chat about that. So if you have anything else to add on the grain end, please do so. If not, we can move into cattle markets.
Yeah, there's a couple of points on the grain side that I think are important to make note of, and one is, we have entered into a bit of a weather-driven rally, and since the lows, even just as recent as a couple of weeks ago, we've seen canola and corn and soybeans in particular up 15, 16, 17, 18%. So that's a nice little move higher, and getting back into that. The downtrend that we've been seeing, but we've had a nice rally. So you want to look at that as an opportunity to make some marketing decisions. And it depends on where people are priced at, right? Like if someone's got, only 0 or 10% of their overall expected production priced, and depending on what their concerns are for weather and growing, and if they're an extremely dry area, it's a bit of a different decision than someone who's got decent subsoil moisture, and they typically get good crops, and it's off to a good start. So it kind of depends on where you sit. But if you're not priced very much, again, 0 or 10% or 20% of your overall production, this is where options can really fit in and fill in that gap, because it'll allow you to take your priced and protected with options amount of your crop up to maybe a third or 50%, or I mean, in some cases I've seen people go up to 2/3 when prices of canola were sitting at $800 or even 750. So the options give you a really good flexible tool to protect your price. You still get all the upside, and very important in this environment, and especially in certain areas, without having to commit your grain for delivery. And that's probably what holds a lot of people back naturally, is not wanting to make commitments and then they can't deliver. So options provide a solution to a lot of those concerns. Do I have enough? Will prices go higher? I'm not sure what to do. So it kind of fills in that void. As I said in the past, it's a little bit of a Swiss Army knife of marketing tools, because a couple of strategies can offer a lot of solutions. So I think that's important to keep in mind here, especially as we're coming into June, July, which is often a bit of a seasonal, weather-driven excitement for prices, if you want to put it that way. And that's what we're coming into. And often it finishes off, Canada Day and 4th of July, when we're all lighting off our fireworks, and the markets tend to do the same thing. So we'll see if that continues. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, is we are still in a longer term downtrend. And the other point that comes up on the grain marketing side often too is that, yes, I mean, there's different commodities that you can hedge, like corn and wheat and canola and soybeans, but a lot of growers don't necessarily produce a lot of those crops. They might have well, a lot of canola is grown in a lot of areas, but there's durum, there's peas, there's lentils. Barley is another big one too. And there are ways that you can still look at using these marketing tools to help hedge that. And, you know, barley's a good one. It's a very large crop across Canada. And especially if you're in a feedlot area and there's a lot of feed demand, barley is going to closely follow more or less what the price of corn is going to do. Not all the time and not one for one, but I have seen a lot of producers use corn as a way to hedge their barley prices. So it at least gives them an outlet. If you're a grower where you got a lot of barley and maybe a lot of peas and canola, well, this gives you at least an option on another portion of your crop. And if you're in an area where you have, say, a lot of durum and a lot of lentils, that type of thing, where you can hedge them, you want to be a little bit more proactive on, say, your canola, because you do have an outlet to be able to hedge that. And I've even seen some people take the approach where, you become much more proactive on your canola, but at the same time, you can kind of look at your revenues as sort of an overall general revenue hedge. And while you might not grow, wheat and corn and soybeans, in this last year, we've seen that as all the markets have come down together, right? Whether it's been peas or durum or canola, they're all dropping. So in many situations, and it depends on just to what extent, but you can just use some general protection on a basket of grain prices where they do have options available to hedge off those markets that you might grow, like, again, the durums, the lentils, the peas. So there are ways to be a little bit more creative with these tools, instead of just kind of sitting back and, maybe getting some advice or some recommendations or some ideas, but not doing anything about it. This gives you an outlet to actually, do something about it as well. So those are some points on the grain markets that I think are very good, not just to keep in mind, but to act upon, because we don't know where prices are going. But if they're a lot lower, in 6 months, then and even if they're not, there's still tools to have in the toolbox on a year in, year out basis.
Fantastic. Okay, that was great. Grain markets. Do we have anything to add before we move on to cattle?
No, I've covered what I see on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, talking to people, and I think those are some of the most important points. But cattle is another one that comes up a lot, and for obvious reasons, it's getting a lot of news, getting a lot of attention, and we're almost, we haven't seen these prices in almost 10 years, and we're sitting at all-time highs for cattle prices. So that naturally brings it gets people's attention, let's put it that way. And if you're a cattle producer, I don't have to tell you that these prices are really good. Yeah, there you go, right? So what these prices are doing.
Yeah.
But like any commodity, they have their time and they have their run, and once they start to get a lot of attention in a press like this, and I'm just waiting for the cattle issue to hit the front cover of a lot of the more popular magazines, and that'll be a bit better of a sign that maybe we're close to a top in this thing. We haven't seen that quite yet, and we're still trending higher, but we definitely are seeing signs where you hear about um, you know herd sizes being reduced, and a lot of culling going on. And in some cases, I've read in certain parts of the states that it's actually more profitable to be a cattle farmer than a grain farm, and we haven't heard that in, I don't know, in a long period of time, right? So it's some of those signs that these prices are really getting up there. And the one thing that I've really noticed over several years is that a lot of the cattle producers have a lot fewer alternatives on the marketing side than on the grain side. Even on the grain side, you can forward sell to different buyers, but on the cattle side, it's not necessarily quite as easy to do so. So it could be that cattle put options as a way to protect that downside is, just as valuable or even more valuable in the setting of a cattle operation, because you just don't have as many places to go to protect that price. So I'm seeing more and more of that. And some people have told me, look, I mean, at these prices, it would be ridiculous not to do something. And when you crunch a few numbers, right, where we're sitting at, you know, 2.5 bucks a pound, and you can protect against your downside for the next several months, over the next year, for maybe 10 cents a pound, something like that, and your net price is higher than you've ever seen it before. Well, those are some pretty good numbers. And it doesn't mean it doesn't go higher, but at the end of the day, regardless if it goes higher, you can still protect some amazing prices. And as we know, as we saw this time last year with grains, it was going nowhere but higher. And look at where we are now. So those are very important points to keep in mind here on cattle, because things change, right? Markets change, and all of a sudden, the demand that was there and the lack of supply that was there, and the dryness that's caused the reduction in available feeder cattle, all of a sudden that can all change too.
I'm going to jump in there. When we've been having droughts, there's a lot of producers that have sold off, right? And herds are shrinking,
Yes.
and herds are shrinking. The amazing part with these prices are, yay, hallelujah, we're excited. But here's what, and again, upside and downside, depending where you're at, there's a lot of talk that any producers that are still in, they're going to be getting out right away. So, I mean, you're concerned, right? Because if you're
Yep.
hanging on and you're still here and you're going, wow, I can sell out the calves, I can sell out the cows, I can sell it all at this price and be done.
Yeah.
Time to go, right? So, I mean, then you get are we going to flood the market, and then our price is going to be stronger? There's always that back and forth, right? But very curious and exciting times for the beef producers.
Yeah, and those are some exact conversations where we look at some people that might want to be buying, some smaller animals into the fall time, and they're looking at this and saying, I don't know if I want to be buying these. Yes, I can hedge it on the other side, so at least they have that option to do so. But the decision is, I don't know if it's even worth it, right? I mean, maybe what I do is actually, like you say, I'm going to sell off some of these animals, and this could be that opportunity that I've been looking for to lighten up on the cattle side, or in fact get out of it altogether. And that's probably more so some of the smaller, medium-sized operation, but even some of the bigger ones have face those same decisions too. And those are excellent points, Tracy. Absolutely. And I mean, look at what we've seen in the hog market too. Over the past, few months back, the hog prices were at some extremely good levels, and now they've dropped dramatically. So again, things can turn around in a hurry too. And when you see some of these high prices, it becomes a little bit stretched, and you got to start thinking, how do we manage both these opportunities here, but also the risk on them going forward.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay. You know where I'm going to go with this, David. We talk a lot. So
Yeah.
grain markets, cattle markets, and then I'm always going to do the same final call out that I do when we chat together to promote you and your services, of course, but mainly you're a guy that's there. You understand these markets. You're willing to teach farmers. It's funny, right before we started recording, I was doing some writing, and it says, you don't know what you don't know until you know what you didn't know. Right?
I like
And
that. Yeah.
to me, that's a lot of life. You don't know what you didn't know until you know what you didn't know. That's the worst part. But
Yeah.
let's say
That's a very humble approach, especially to the markets, because the markets will teach you if you don't know in a hurry.
yeah. So, hey, I'm a grain producer. I'm a cattle producer in the audience. And this is why I do these episodes. Not all of us understand this stuff. Honestly, I took it in university. I'm still nowhere near a pro. I'm humble. I'm embarrassed. I want to learn more. I'm feeling awkward. Can I call you? First off, where can I learn about this stuff? because I'm a professional and I like to kind of feel like I
Right.
know before I call you. One, is there a call out on where you can learn more? And then number two, are you okay if I just say, hey, David, we are a producer here. Here's our details. This is what's going on. Can you help? How can you help?
Yeah, and to answer that first question, or the second question first, perhaps is yeah, and a lot of that is the process where you've got some really smart, really big, and even not so big, even just medium-sized operations out there, and I mean they're so sophisticated on the equipment side, on the agronomy side, on the technology that they use. But when it comes to the marketing, they'll say, look, I just I know I need to sharpen up the pencils, and there's more to be done, because those are 100-cent dollars that are out there that we want to be able to capture. So I do have resources that I have available for those exact purposes to get someone a little bit more comfortable and confident in how they work. And you're right, more and more people have been using some of these tools. Maybe they've taken some courses or in university, or just doing their own study up on them. And I do have a lot of resources that help in that first step. And that kind of answers the first question too, is there are a lot of places out there, but I've kind of curated over the years a couple of very good pieces that are kind of fairly straight to the point, simple, straightforward to understand. And that's always the first step. And I find, all of us were human, and we learn by doing, by getting our hands in there. And that's where I've often seen the most success, is where someone learns it to the point where they realize, yeah, this can help my operation. I understand that. So let's start doing something about it. And that can be as simple as a small portion of your the grain that you're going to produce, or maybe it's some inventory in the bins, or maybe a portion of the cattle that you're going to be selling in the fall time, and kind of learning by doing. And then lo and behold, after a few months or a year or so, these people get to the point where there's, and I really like it when they're calling in to me and saying, hey, here's something I thought about. Does it make sense? Yes, no, otherwise, let's go over it and see how it can really come into play. So, and I've been doing this 25 years, and, and it some days, everything makes really good sense. And other days you look at it and say, well, maybe here's a better way to go about it, and I hadn't thought about it, or because the markets move. So it's not something that people should feel like they have to know it before they do it, because you're never going to know it all. Why? Because the markets are always changing. So that instantly affects what's the best strategy to look at, when to do it. And sometimes the best decision is kind of to sit back and do nothing. But if you have your account set up and in place, then at least you can control the pace at when and at what times you want to do something. So I think that those are some very practical points, and that's all part of the process, is working with the businesses to help incorporate these kind of marketing into their day to day, week to week, month to month, year after year decision making process.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing all that with us. If producers want to contact you, maybe just give a shout out for your website, and I'll include it all in the show notes as well, David.
Yeah, the best way that from a website point of view that people can at least contact, it's just commodity-options.ca. Again, commodity-options.ca. And I'm a big believer in picking up a phone and talking to, and I'm here in Winnipeg, and I deal with businesses all across the prairies. But a straight out phone call is often probably one of the more effective ways to get the process going. And the number 204-982-0011. I find that's a good way to go. Again, that 204-982-0011, if anyone wants to reach out. And especially in these times here, obviously for cattle producers with these high prices, by the time you need an umbrella, it's too late, right? So you want to start looking at them now. And on the grain side, we're going to have ups and downs and big moves and trends higher and lower. And there's a time and a place. So it's good to at least be set up so that you're ready when the opportunities present themselves.
Excellent. David, like always, that was very educational, a great conversation, great information. If you don't have anything else to add, I'm going to include all your contact information in the show page notes. And if you don't have anything to add, we'll sign off. So final chance to say farewell, final words of wisdom, and then we are done.
Well, I think that the last point, because I think this is what we need to remember every day, is the markets are going to do what they're going to do regardless, and they're going to surprise both ways. When in big trends up, big trends down, smaller moves up, smaller moves down. So I think it's all about just being prepared and having a lot of different strategies available. And one piece of the marketing puzzle are options. And keep an eye on these weather prices, because or how the weather is going to affect these prices, because it will get a lot of attention, and that can often be the time when it's getting too much attention one way or the other. It's time to look at if everyone's going one way, maybe start looking at the other. So it's good to stay on top of the markets regardless.
Okay, that makes sense. Wonderful, David. Thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it very much.
And I thank you, Tracy. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure as well. You guys in the audience, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed it, like it, share it, and get it out there so other producers can hear this valuable information as well. Thanks, guys. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.